get started with Thar. Michael, you want to do a 30,000 of Thar?
Would love to. Well, so this was actually one of the first, I would say, big Desi films that I've watched from beginning to end in detail. And man, I can just say that I really, really enjoyed this one. In the very beginning, there were a bunch of different, cultural things just kind of going on that I was trying to pick up on. But this movie really, really clicked about 20 minutes in. They get you really engaged, and they show this kind of dual plot timeline going on between the deputy himself and our main antagonist. His name was Siddharth, I want to say. Siddharth, yeah, perfect. Not coming off the top of my head the best, but this movie was great. I thought that, throughout the entire thing, they let you, kind of piece by piece to build the suspense up until the very end. And one big thing in this movie that I definitely want to be able to explore is masculinity in India. I thought that this movie did a great job at showing what that kind of is and how it kind of comes out, and would just love to discuss it more. So, I guess, to kind of first start off, what were some of the things you noticed about that? I noticed that there was just a lot of, body language going on, some different signals between the men that were in this. And I'm really curious to hear on, how that may portray in real life.
No, absolutely. So if you did not know, Michael is produced by the guy who plays a cop. That's Anil Kapoor. He's, of course, a star. And if you guys haven't watched Slumdog Millionaire, this is the guy from Slumdog Millionaire. But also he's somebody who's been, who's every inch of a superstar in India for the last 4 decades or so. And this movie introduces his son, Harshvardhan Kapoor, and the guy Siddharth is played by Harshvardhan Kapoor. And basically, it's a very gritty movie about crime and punishment, if I may just put it very,
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it.
It's a savage drama. It's savage not only in terms of the story, but also the blood and the gore and the skin and swear and everything else that comes with it. But also the landscape has been, the way the cinematography, the barren landscape of the desert. This is a place that is, that's a no man's land, practically on the India-Pakistan border. And the story, the way it's been shot, the way the story unfolds itself is full of mystery. The antique trader Siddharth arrives with money and offers work to a lot of local people and tries to win their trust. But nobody knows that he also is coming with a grudge, and then he has a thirst for revenge. And then he starts picking people up and torturing them, and nobody knows why he's torturing them till we finally realize why he's doing that in the end. And we actually realize it as the cop unravels the mystery too, because there have been people that have that have been killed and mercilessly tortured before killed. So obviously, the cop is a little confused as to why somebody would kill. If it was just for the drugs or the money, nobody would be mercilessly killing. So it had to be some motive more than just drugs and money. So I thought the movie was really well shot. I thought the movie was very well put together. And so we were talking about Thar, a movie that is streaming on Netflix, starring Anil Kapoor and his son, Harshvardhan Kapoor. So Michael, what did you think?
Yeah, so I mean, from the very beginning, was very engaged with the film. They did a really good job setting up, kind of the beginning of this mystery, setting up the character Siddharth and the deputy that was on this case. Things that I noticed from the very beginning that I thought, were really, good things to probably talk about was the different kind of, as I mentioned earlier, this masculine energy going on between the characters. You can just watch through interactions that there is, a fight for, some sort of like power or dominance over each other as they just speak. And if you watch Siddharth act and, do this, you can really see that he stands with this bravado. He talks, in a minimalist way, in a way that's very pointed as well. And I'm very curious to hear too if this translates outside of the movie at all, if this is things that are seen, here in real life, if there's this sort of kind of masculinity or power dynamic going on between men in India.
No, true, and you actually picked that up really well. But there is on one hand, there's this masculinity. On the other hand, there is this entire the way women are treated as second-class citizens,
Exactly.
with absolutely no rights, the way the guy treats his wife, Chetna, and she absolutely has no rights, literally. And Fatima Sana Sheikh, the actress who plays Chetna, actually has done quite a fantastic job in really, she speaks with her eyes, and in a very understated performance as Chetna. The quiet desperation, her scenes with Jitendra Joshi as Pana, her husband, are a brilliant portrayal of the dynamics between a man and a wife who, despite being infertile, does not stop believing that she deserves more. And
Right.
the funny part of this entire thing is that the end of it, when she actually does betray him and sleeps with the stranger, she does get pregnant. So it was never her, it was him who had an issue. But
Right.
she was the one who was blamed and stigmatized her entire life of, and she was just treated like an outsider. She was treated like a stigmatized person. But also, I think what I really have to point out is the violence, the level of violence. What you got to say about that, Michael?
The scenes were very gruesome. Just watching the different scenes with Siddharth and the people that he brought in, but as well as the scenes that were portraying domestic violence were very hard to watch. But at the same time, they were very well done. The effects were very, very realistic, and when looking at it closely, you kind of have to turn away because that's how good that they're shooting it. And so you know, I think at first you're thinking that Siddharth is just this deranged guy, this psychopath. They do a really good job of showing him in these scenes when he is committing these acts of violence towards these guys, but then also back in the village, being part of the community, talking with the wife, and just kind of being this charismatic guy. And the interactions between him and the cop are just, I think, some of the most, like bring up the hairs on your arms as you're watching that. So, the different mechanisms as well that he was using to choose to torture, such as staking in his victims to the ground, hanging them by the wrist on the wood log. And the even most gruesome part was watching a rat chew through the stomachs of his victims. So Siddharth came with a grudge. He took it out on the guys that committed an act that he will never forgive. And when you watch this, you may have to cover your eyes a little bit, because even for me, I was watching this and was just a little grossed out just a little bit.
I know I had to close my eyes through a lot of scenes, and we have to tell our listeners that and viewers that yes, we had to. The blood and gore element was pretty high. Red, White, and Brown with Michael Emerald, and we are here reviewing Thar, which is streaming on Netflix, and we are talking about all the blood and gore that we had to watch when we were reviewing the movie for you guys. And you know what we say to you? We say that we watch it so you don't have to. So actually, it's the kind of movie that you might end up watching just once in a while. But yes, this movie is just not for family. It is not for kids. It's not for family. There's a lot of sex and swear. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of blood and gore. But my question is this a classic? It,
Yeah, that's a great question. I really do think that this did have an element of what you would see in classic. It was a great Western film. I think this kind of dual plot that was going on was great to follow along. And there's also a point in the movie where it just clicks. There's a point in the movie where you are so engaged that you do not want to stop. I had this playing on my phone while I was drinking coffee, and I was walking around the house with my phone in my hand, watching it, forgetting I had coffee in my hand as well. So there's a point in which you just become very engrossed. You want to know what's going on. They kind of lead you on throughout the entire movie. There's also a very great Indian car chase scene that I enjoyed very much. When you watch a movie such as Fast and Furious, and there's these different action scenes going on, you're used to seeing the sports cars going around with the people shooting at the back. This was a makeshift Jeep kind of work van that was going on with just a couple different bandits that were shooting back as well. So I thought the difference between a car chase scene in this kind of a movie and the ones that I'm used to watching was just really funny to watch. But nonetheless, is this a classic? I definitely think so. I definitely think that this just had an element. The way they shot the movie, the way they used the landscape as well, was very well done. It just had this real gritty element to it that I don't think a lot of other movies can get. That's definitely my take on it. What are your thoughts?
So I think Shreya Dev captured, who actually is a cinematographer, she captured some really breathtaking sequences. She was really good at it. The editing was all right because it was 108 minutes, which is like a miracle for Indian movies, which sometimes go on for 3 hours. And there are times when you're like you're sitting in a theater and you're like, oh my god, I wish there was a fast forward button somewhere.
Sure.
We could utilize seriously. But Arti Bajaj, the editor, she did a fine job of just keeping this under 108 minutes. So love that. Absolutely. Ajay Jayanti's background score was okay. Love it. But was this so where do you think I found things amiss here was all right, so the story covered a lot of underlying issues: the status of women, their safety, of course, the entire caste system, how the caste system permeates every angle of life in India.
Right.
Gosh, it's horrendous. And of course, the drug trail and how easy it is. I mean, everybody knows it's happening around you, and nobody really cares, right? The narrative covers each and every aspect of it. But somehow, along the way, the overtone becomes very, it's like a moral science lecture.
Yep. Yep.
And that is what kind of ticked me off.
There's this
It's still
dialogue.
obviously more moralistic.
There's this dialogue going on where they're trying to determine whether or not Siddharth is a good guy or not within the movie. Even the deputy in one scene is saying, I don't know who's telling the story. Maybe it's not a villain, maybe it's a good guy, or maybe it's the supporting character. And I think once this, once it started to progress, you kind of got this moral element that was a little bit weird to kind of, handle, because you're watching people get staked into poles while trying to determine whether or not this was a morally correct uh, way to go about that. So I definitely agree with you there, and I definitely agreed with all the past points too, especially with the caste system. There were a lot of different themes within this movie that were talking about it, and I thought that they portrayed it really well, as far as my knowledge goes. But this was great. But yeah, if you wanted to continue with that moral element, they were almost trying to say that this was the way to get revenge by taking 3 or 4 guys and brutally torturing them.
Absolutely. So when we would say our recommendation would be a one-time watch, and yes, it's not a family movie. We recommend that you get yourself really prepared for a lot of violence and some scenes where you can see skin, you can see flesh and blood, and really stark. I mean, if you've seen Mirzapur, this is way worse, guys. So yeah, a one-time watch good enough, and I think that's our review. That's our recommendation.